Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman. I want to welcome you to a very, very special edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sitdown. That's right, folks. We are chilling in the comic book corner once again, which means we are back for another edition of the Seaman's Infinity War Countdown. You know the drill, folks. Pull up a chair, take a seat. Tonight, we are going back, shuffling things again, and moving Iron Man 2 up into the third position. That's right, it was the third movie released by Marvel, but this came after The Incredible Hulk. In the timeline, it comes right after Iron Man 1. This is one of those movies that a lot of people have kind of, in the past, have, pushed to the side because all these other Marvel movies have come out that are better than it. It's never really been highly touted in the Iron Man world, right? You have Iron Man, and then 2 and 3 just kind of get lost toward the back half of the rankings, and I've always kind of felt that way. I was never super impressed with Iron Man 2. I love Iron Man 2 because I love Downey Jr. playing Iron Man. Downey is everything, and Downey is great in every movie he appears in. But I had always kind of had this feeling the movie was okay. Rewatching it all these years later, it's been years since I've seen it, liked it so much better than I remembered. They do a few things really, really well, but there are a couple major issues, and if the issues kind of detract from the stuff they do well. So you know me, I like to start with the bad, end with the good. And the first thing for me is more preferential than it is really a gripe in the movie, but I thought it was too early to get depressed, pissy Tony. I didn't like watching Tony have to deal with his own mortality in the second film. Downey Jr. plays it fantastically. You really get a sense that he feels mortal and that he can see the end because he's slowly dying. The palladium cores that he uses in his arc reactors, he's burning through them too fast, and it's essentially releasing toxins and gas and poison in his body, and you can kind of see it spreading visually. And that it works, right? Like, when you look at the grand scheme, and that's Kevin Feige's wheelhouse, Iron Man 1 and 2 give you a full story arc for Tony leading into Avengers, but that when you get there, his motivations and what he's thinking about and how he's approaching it are totally different. However, coming off Iron Man 1, where you do such a great job building who Tony is and why he is Iron Man and how he becomes Iron Man, to the point where he literally walks out on a news conference and goes, "I'm Iron Man." You thought he'd have more fun in this movie, and he does. I mean, he does have fun. The beginning of the opening sequence is great. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I thought it was too early to have this version of Tony. Maybe this version works better in 3. You could have done this exact same story, and not had that have to be the root for Tony's character. That being said, it works well enough in the movie, and Downey pulls it off so well. Like I said, preferential. Me, I would have liked to have just seen Tony having more fun in general. But now it's the real crux of what the film is, and it has to do with the villain Whiplash, which is funny because we're going to talk about him on the other side of this in a minute. Whiplash is almost like a 50-50 split. You almost had a really, really great villain, but you missed on a couple spots. And it starts at the beginning with the fact that the beginning's wonderful. And we're going to merge. We're going to talk about the good and the bad with Ivan all together right now. And when we're done with Ivan, we'll be strictly into the good stuff. But like the opening of this movie opens with Vanko. You see him with his father. His father dies. Then you see him starting to build his own kind of Stark tech. He creates his own arc reactor core for a suit. And you watch him kind of build that. While you're watching him, you're seeing newspaper clippings and come to understand that Tony's father had Vanko's dad deported. And we're led to assume that that's led to the rough life that, Ivan Vanko, Mickey Rourke's character, has had his whole life. But it's really, really fuzzy. It's not super clear. And watching it, I knew it was clear because I know the whole story. They really clean it all up toward the back half of the second act, where Nick Fury kind of lays everything out for Tony. It's like, look, this is who this guy is. He worked with your dad, or his dad worked with your dad. And when he wanted to get into it for the money, and your dad was more about changing the world, Howard had him deported. Russia then had him sent to Siberia, and that led him to become an alcoholic and a terrible father. And that has birthed Ivan Vanko, who's got this crazy vengeance just for Tony Stark. And that works so well. Giving him that legit motivation is very much like Eric Killmonger in Black Panther, which we just saw recently. And everybody loved him. The problem is it's fuzzy at the beginning. If you make that more clear, you can still hold on to the Howard Stark stuff for the end of the second act when Nick is talking to Tony. But if you could have cleared up exactly what was going on, that probably works better. Then you get to the middle of the movie, and the middle of the movie is where the writing gets really wonky for him. Has a fantastic sequence with Tony in Monaco. It's one of the best Iron Man sequences for me, look-wise. I love everything about the Monaco sequence. Tony is dealing with his own mortality and decides, screw it, I'm gonna go race. And it's the Monaco race that all the celebrities go to. Everybody's there now. Oh man, Tony's racing, and then Vanko shows up. And this part is brilliant. When he breaks out his whips, he's in this orange jumpsuit, and the jumpsuit kind of burns off to reveal everything he's wearing. So badass. The look of it is so cool. And that whole sequence is amazing. He really, really does combat Tony quite well in that sequence. And the look of everything. The way he rips cars in half with the whips. The way he's able to kind of get on Tony and lock Tony up. And there's humor in it. Action, and you're scared and you don't really know what to expect, and it's all great. Happy tries to kill him. He drives the car into him a bunch of times. Then the car gets split apart. And then you get one of the best Iron Man suit sequences. It was so inventive to have a briefcase for Tony to step on that becomes, he takes up, pulls on, it's his chest. Everything about it's so cool looking. And they really do some unique stuff. It's the beginning of really starting to have fun with Tony's suits, and it works so well. And then, Tony does Tony. He finally knocks him out, and it's great. You really feel scared for Tony before he gets the suit, the way they execute the suit, the banter between him and Pepper as the car's getting split in half. He's like, toss me the briefcase, and it's all great. But right after that, again, you get this really fuzzy kind of writing for Ivan Vanko, where he has this really intense conversation with Tony where he's talking about how if you can, Tony's like, I won. Why are you still smirking? And he's like, did you win? He goes, if you can make a god bleed, people will stop believing. And that's kind of his concept. The way he talks to him is almost like, hey, I know I'm going to show back up in the third act. But in reality, he's a loner. He's got nobody in the States. There's no way for him to get out of prison. He doesn't know he's going to get out of prison, but he acts like he knows he's got to get out of prison. There's no way for him to know that Hammer is going to break him out. So it's kind of weird. And the writing aspect in that sequence is like, okay, why, how, what? Just the way Rourke reacts to things doesn't really make sense. And then the ending of the character is a tragedy. He shows up after an amazing sequence, and then it's like, boom, he's got this Iron Man suit with whips, and he's going to fight Tony and Rhodes at the same time. You're like, this is going to be awesome. And then literally it's like 30 seconds and over. If you give him a phenomenal sequence at the end to end this movie in the finale, in the final act, you probably forget about some of the writing flaws. But because the finale's so weak, it's like, you started here with Vanko and then just slowly went this way. That being said, I love Rourke in the character. Mickey Rourke does a great job. It was so nice to see him back on screen back then. I think this kind of got him back and going and eventually led to The Wrestler, which he got nominated for an Oscar for. It was just great. He's so good. And he looks like he's having a lot of fun with the character. Because he took a lot of ownership in the character. The look of Ivan Vanko is one of the best parts of Vanko. He's got this long black hair with white streaks in it. He's got this goatee that's really awesome, but just this tiny patch right here is gray. Gold teeth, all these tattoos, and come to find out, a lot of this was Rourke. Rourke wanted all these tattoos on his body and like went and did research to find like stuff Russian people would wear or like have on wear. You don't wear a tattoo, it would have on them. He's got these awesome like finger tattoos right here with a date, and then it's like all different card symbols. Would love to know what that means. But everything about it, and a lot of it had to do with Mickey Rourke. And then he's got this one odd thing about him that's great. He has a parakeet that he's obsessed about. And that comes into play later in the movie with Sam Rockwell's Justin Hammer, who we'll talk about right now. Sam Rockwell, one of the other new additions to the Iron Man universe at this point, played by Sam Rockwell. So good. Like I said, he has this really awesome banter with Mickey Rourke in the movie about the bird. Rourke basically he breaks Rourke out of jail so Rourke can make suits so that Hammer can be better than Tony. Hammer is the opposition in the world of weapons, and now that Tony has kind of removed himself from making weapons, it's opened the door for Justin Hammer. So he breaks Rourke out of prison to make Rourke make suits so that he can beat Tony at his own game at the Stark Expo. And Rourke tells him he won't do any work unless you bring him his bird. They find out that it's parakeet. Hammer just gets a parakeet, shows up, and Mickey Rourke's like, "That is not my bird." He's like, "Bring me my bird." I can't do the Rourke does the accent so much better than me. And Hammer's like, "What do you mean this is your bird? We went all the way to Russia. We get the bird. It's from Russia. Like, just do the work." And then he comes back around afterwards, and he's like chilling with the bird. He's like, "Oh, now you and the bird are friends." It's a great sequence. The banter between him and Mickey Rourke is awesome. But Justin Hammer, God, I love Sam Rockwell in this movie. His interactions and relationship with Tony are great. It starts in court. Tony gets called in. Basically, the U.S. is trying to put sanctions on Tony. Again, world-building stuff for later down the road. By the time we get to Civil War, the concept of like trying to put sanctions on superheroes, it starts all the way back in Iron Man. We get to see Gary Shandling, the great late legend. Gary Shandling, he's brilliant in this movie too. He plays the politician who's basically coming after Tony. He talks down to Tony. Then Hammer talks down to Tony. And Tony just kind of buys his time. And eventually takes over the entire room. He breaks into their court systems. He starts throwing up all these really, really bad videos of Hammer. And it's great. Every time him and Hammer interact, Rockwell always calls him Anthony. Never calls him Tony. He just wants to stick it to Tony in every way he can. And every time he thinks he's going to, Tony flips it on him. Flips it on him in the courtroom. Shows that his tech is really, really bad. Shows that nobody can have a suit, and that's why I'm Iron Man. And it's a great scene. Rockwell's just like, ugh. Then you get them again in Monaco. They're having back and forth again, and Hammer's like, "I'm going to blow everybody away at your expo." And Tony's like, "Yeah, man, if you actually do something good, I'll give you a spot." And the banter just between the two of them is so good. Rockwell, brilliant, always is too. So glad that he has an Oscar finally, because things like this, right, stuff he would never get nominated for, he's brilliant in. And his best sequence doesn't actually come with RDJ. It comes with Rhodes, Colonel James Rhodes. And basically, Rhodes ends up having to steal a suit from Tony, and they want to give it to Hammer so Hammer can create suits for them to use. And in order for them to turn it over, they want tech from Hammer. So Hammer starts pulling out all these guns, man. He starts small. He's like, "You got this one, then you got this one, and then you got this one. And hey, size doesn't matter because now you got this one." And it's like Rockwell just owns that sequence. It's probably the best scene you get from Rockwell in the entire film. And then he breaks out the big one, the Cohiba. And I loved this. It's a missile about this big. And he basically says it's, it'll bust a tank, bust bunkers. You shoot it into a small, tiny place, it's going to blow everything up. Cheadle ends up, oh, shoot. That's right, folks, I just slipped. Rhodes, we'll talk about what I just slipped on in a minute. Rhodes ends up going to use the Cohiba at one point in the third act, and it just goes, and and it's a complete dud. Tony kind of looks at him and goes, Hammer tech? And that's the thing. Hammer makes all this tech and acts like he knows what he's doing, and then his tech is just not very good. And the reason I love that and the way he talks about that little tiny missile, oh my gosh, it's so funny. It almost cares for it like a baby, and then it doesn't work. And what makes that great is it is a legit callback right to Iron Man, the first one, where when he shows up in the suit, pops that little missile off, goes, hits a tank with a little dink, he turns and walks away, and you're like, what? And then it blows up. So it's great, because right there, it's like legit tech that matches Tony's, and it's no good. Rockwell, brilliant. Now, I just had a big slip, because I frequently will talk about characters with their real names, and the thing in this movie, and it is a big good, James Rhodes is now played by Don Cheadle. Terrence Howard, we had him in the first movie. He was the highest paid actor on that cast list because he was the first person cast. He was coming off of Hustle and Flow, which he was nominated for an Oscar for. There was a lot of buzz around Terrence Howard when this movie came out. And he was the first one signed. And then by the time you got to Iron Man 2, it was like, well, now we have to pay Downey. And you can't pay them both. So they go out and they get Don Cheadle for a little bit less. And Don Cheadle, as much as I love Terrence Howard, Don Cheadle is such a superior actor. Again, one of the best character actors in the game. Every time you're going to add ancillary characters to a movie, adding really, really good character actors is humongous. And Sam Rockwell and Don Cheadle live in the world of character acting, and they're so good at it. And Cheadle just owns Rhodes in a way that Howard didn't. His intro to the movie is brilliant. The camera's behind him. We're just on the back of his head. Kind of swing around, and Tony goes, oh, I wasn't expecting to see you here. Like, I wasn't expecting to see Don Cheadle here. And Don's like, yeah, look, it's me. I'm here. Let's move on. And it's just brilliant stuff. And that just kind of gets you rolling, right? His relationship with Tony's brilliant. They just banter off each other in a way that people who are super, super cool can banter with each other. And that's the problem with Terrence Howard. Terrence Howard, great actor. Don Cheadle, the kind of actor who walks in with swagger. You know, he's that kind of actor, very much like RDJ. It's like, I'm Don Cheadle, man. And because of that attitude, when you put that with RDJ's Stark, they play off each other so well. I love Don Cheadle. He has a sequence where Tony, like I said, Tony's dealing with his own mortality in the movie. So he has a birthday party and he talks to another new character, Scarlett Johansson's Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow. He's talking to her before he finds out who she is. At this point, he just thinks she works in legal at Stark. And in reality, she's an embedded agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And before he finds this out, he goes, if you knew you were going to die, what would you do for your birthday? And she was like, anything I want with whoever I want. You're like, oh, man, ScarJo's making the moves. Like, no, man, like, because, he's got Pepper. He loves Pepper. He loves Pepper, even though they haven't, hooked up at all. You're like, oh, man, ScarJo's coming in trying to steal Downey. Not what's going on, as we come to find out. But that leads Tony to decide to wear the Iron Man suit at the party, and he just gets wasted, and he gets dangerous. He starts using his pulsers on his hands to shoot bottles of champagne, watermelon. He has a spat with Pepper. She's trying to get him to just go to bed because he's too drunk, and that sends him off the rails. And Rhodes has to go down, take a suit, and stop Iron Man. And they have this awesome fight sequence. It's so good. And it all happens inside Tony's home. And they kind of just destroy everything. And it ends with the two of them using their pulsers at each other. And it creates this huge explosion type thing, which plays toward the back half of the movie. Sets up a nice little callback. But yeah, everything about Don Cheadle, because of just who he is and the swagger he has, is just so good. I mentioned Scarlett Johansson. She's also a new add to the Iron Man world and the Marvel Cinematic Universe at this point. She plays Natasha Romanoff, the Black Widow. And what we come to find out, she's a spy. She shows up in the movie when Tony is training in his boxing ring, saying she's from legal. And she's great, man. She has a great banner with Gwyneth Paltrow's Pepper Potts, because Pepper starts to realize, like, you know, Tony is Tony, and Tony's got goo-goo eyes for, you know, I think her name at this point is Natalia or something like that, or Natalie, and she can kind of see it in the immediate jealousy. And ScarJo and her kind of play off that the whole movie, and it's really, really good. And then it flips on Tony, and now that all of a sudden, after Tony kind of has the party situation, you know, now it's like, oh, all of a sudden it flips where Paltrow and ScarJo are kind of cool with each other, and she just plays all that stuff so well, to the point that you don't even know that she's a spy. Like, you're watching and you're like, oh man, like, if you're not thinking about it, you would totally never see the twist coming. And then, oh god, like, Favreau gave probably the best Black Widow scene we've ever seen, and as soon as that sequence ended, she should have had her own movie. I mean, Kevin Feige's already come out and apologized, saying we should have given Black Widow a movie. We should have been the first ones to do a female superhero story first. And it should have happened. And that sequence, it's mixed in the third act with a chase sequence with Rhodes and Tony. You kind of go between the two. But the scene that she has, it's with Happy. Happy's driving. She says, you stay here. He's like, I'm not letting you go into this building with all these bad guys by yourself. And Happy ends up having a huge, kind of like boxing, bare-knuckle boxing match with one guy. And in the meantime, while he's doing all of that with one dude, Natasha runs through this place and just takes out like 15 dudes. I mean, and she's fast. The way she moves, the look, everything about it, you're just like, oh yeah. And watching ScarJo do it, you're just like, oh yeah, she's wonderful to watch. And she is so hot, kicking ass. I mean, God, she does this thing, man, where she finishes a guy and then looks up like this. Oh man, talk about getting my heart rate up. But that sequence, man, it just completely encapsulates what she is for the universe. You get her as Black Widow up front in a way that's like, wow, like I want more of her. And the best part is she kicks like 15 dudes' asses, and as she's walking away, completely emotionless, just on to the next thing that she's got to do. A dude pops up, she just pepper sprays him in the face, keeps going. It's brilliant. ScarJo owns this character so much. I cannot wait for the day where they finally give her her own movie, because I want to see it. I love Black Widow, and you get that in Iron Man 2 established right away. She's fantastic. As I said, everyone else is back. You know, you got Pepper. Pepper's back. Great. You know, her and Downey just continue to build off of what they did in Iron Man, only this time they finally do get to seal the deal a little bit at the end. And that's a really cute moment. Like, everything's over. Downey saves her. They're kind of standing on this, like, mountain-looking thing overlooking, and they have this really emotional reaction, and then you just hear Rhodes in the background, and they're like, he's like, get your own roof, man. I've been sitting here. They're not a mountain, they're on a rooftop. And he's like, I've been sitting on this roof for a while. I heard the whole thing. You don't have to tell me. But they're great. I mean, because they're at odds a lot of the movie, Pepper and Tony's banter is just so good. It makes the payoff of them finally kissing and acknowledging that they should be a thing. That sexual tension that existed in the first one, you finally get that payoff at the end. And it just makes everything they go through in the movie brilliant. So yeah, I mean, Pepper's back. Gwyneth Paltrow, fantastic. Like I said, Happy's back. He has a couple moments. He's great in the Monaco sequence. He has, like, you know, some driving to do. Love that Happy gets some chase sequences, although not being chased, he's running to something. And then, of course, the scene with ScarJo, and that's just so good, because Favreau tries so hard to beat up one dude, and when he finally knocks him out, you know, he gives him an uppercut, and the guy goes flying, and he's like, all right. And then just sees the hallway littered with bodies because Black Widow went in there and cleaned up house. So Favreau's great having him back. Obviously, Gwyneth back doing great things as Pepper. And then, of course, the man we all know and love, the reason we come to the movies, Robert Downey Jr. is brilliant as always. Like I said, I preferentially was not a huge fan of the going depressed Tony route, but man, does Downey play it so well. You really, really get the sense of this guy in the first one we saw dealing with his own mortality at the beginning of the movie, knowing he was going to die. Then he doesn't. He becomes Iron Man, and now you see him free and having all this fun. And now you figured out how to free yourself to a place you've never been, and the thing that's freeing you is killing you. and Downey just plays it so well. But just the Iron Man stuff in the movie, man, there's so many moments for him that are genius. Like I said, the Monaco sequence is maybe one of the best Iron Man sequences that I've ever seen. Visually, and what they do, the inventiveness of the scene is just so good. You know, like I said, I loved the way he intros himself into the movie at the Stark Expo, jumping out of a plane, something we've seen. Maybe this is a trend with our main two heroes, jumping out of planes. You know, the way he arrives at the Stark Expo, just being Tony. Downey is just living in Tony Stark by this point. He is Tony Stark, and his banter, his wittiness, it makes, you know, like I said, the humor in the Iron Man movies is so good because it's just natural. You know, and the way he interacts with everyone is wonderful. Like I said, Gary Shandling pops up in this movie as a senator, and man, their interactions are so good, even especially at the end. You know, Tony, like, saves the day. He's like, actually, there's one thing we could do. And he gets, you know, Nick Fury to get Shandling to be the one to present him and Rhodes with these medals, and he pins Downey, and he goes, ah! And he goes, oh, man, I'm sorry. He's like, did I get you? He's like, oh, little pricks, they're so annoying, aren't they? Like, something like that. And it's just like, oh, man, because their banner is so good. You know, and then, like I said, Downey, the material Downey's given, maybe not what I would have done in this movie, but he executes it so well. Like I said, there's one of the best sequences. The thing I love about Tony so much is when Tony goes science, right? And he gets in the lab and he's doing work. And he's basically come to the fact that it's going to be over, right? We're coming off of the party, and Nick Fury shows up with good old Phil Coulson. And they're like, hey, you got to babysit Tony, don't let him out of the house. He has to figure this out. And sets Tony off on trying to find something that his dad left him that would fix his problem. And that sequence is so good, man. Seeing Downey like demo stuff in the lab so that he can build this huge thing to basically create a brand new element. And the way he finds it too, right? Like having to, like just going through everything, he can't find anything. He plays a video, and you know, he had a bad relationship with his father. And then in the video, Howard talks directly to Tony. He's like, Tony, you're too young to understand this, but what I've built here, I know you'll be able to figure it out, and that'll set the world free. And it's the giant model of a town that Howard developed. In reality, it's the formula to create a new element. And Tony creating it, oh man, he just thrives so much. And then when he's getting right down close to it, it's a little off. The thing he has that's going to build is a little off. And Coulson comes down, and him and Coulson are having great interactions. And Coulson, he's like, hey, hand me that. And Coulson's looking at a prototype Captain America shield. Right away, we know that Coulson now, after Avengers, we know he's obsessed with Captain America. Watching him the look on his face when he's like this, and he gives it to Tony. He's like, do you know what this is? And Tony's like, I do. Puts it under. He's like, perfectly level. And Coulson just has this look of disgust in his face that you get because now we know he was obsessed with Captain America. So that whole sequence is brilliant. You know, and love that you dropped the Captain America shield in there. World building. You know, we're still building the world out in these early movies. And then for me, like I said, the other great sequence is this chase sequence that him and Rhodes have. At the Stark Expo, Hammer has all these drones that Vanko has created. You know, you have a division for the military, and, you know, for the Army and the Navy and the Coast Guard. And then Vanko has programmed them all so that he can control them, trying to kill Tony. He takes over Rhodes' suit for a while. And then Tony's just off. He shows up, and then he's off and flying, trying to draw everything away from the crowd of people. And it's great, man. The sequence is intricate, and it's tight. The way that he's flying and the way Rhodes is flying, and the fact that Rhodes is under Vanko's control, so he's trying to kill Tony. He's like, Tony, I got no control of the suit. All of it's great, man. You laugh, you have fun. It's mixed in with the Scarlett Johansson sequence. And the sequence as a whole is just built so well. It's one of the best action sequences. You land in the kill zone, this little dome that's kind of like a forest. That's where everything ends. And that sequence is great because now Rhodes is free. And then him and Rhodes are fighting all the drones. There's a shot, man, where Tony like uppercuts one of the drones and then launches himself with his feet and knees him in the face. Like, they just understand how to utilize the technology they've created with the Iron Man suit to make really cool visuals. And then they're completely surrounded, and Tony's like, Rhodes, get down! And does this thing, he spins, and these lasers just cut everything in half. And Rhodes is like, could we have led with that? And he's like, it's a one-off. You can only use it once. Again, like, everything about the sequence is just so strong. Then Vanko shows up, and they could have made everything, that last half hour could have been an unbelievable nonstop action, over a little too quickly. But I mean, that and that sequence, the sequence where Tony is building the new element, and the Monaco sequence are all kind of, there's stuff obviously in between, but they all follow each other one after another almost. And all three of them are like they're just classic Iron Man sequences. Just things that cement and say Iron Man. And I think I have finally exhausted myself. I think this might be the longest one we've done yet. Had so much to talk about because Iron Man 2 deserves more credit than it gets. I really, really enjoy this movie. Downey, I said in Iron Man 1, it might have been the sharpest I've ever seen his facial hair. I forgot Iron Man 2, he's also, like, the other movies now, it's more just kind of goatee, beardish stuff, but oh man, it is so sharp. He's so sharp looking. Just everything about Iron Man I love. And Tony and Downey, who basically is Tony, Downey just owns it so much more in this movie than he did in the first one. Despite being, depressed about dying, he owns the Iron Man stuff so well, and it's just, God, I enjoyed this movie so much more than I thought I would. Now the question is, did you enjoy it even more so this time around? It's your turn to talk. Please, if you're watching the movies along with me, let me know. Like, do you have a different feel on this movie than you did originally? Do you like it? Do you dislike it? If you haven't seen it, welcome. I probably just ruined the whole movie for you. But, let me know everything that you've thought about Iron Man 2. Hit that in the comments section. If you're new here, please hit the subscribe button and the little bell so you get alerts every time I make a new video, especially new Infinity War countdown videos. And if you like the video, please give me a thumbs up. I love getting the love, guys. That's it. That's all I've got to say. The Seaman has exhausted himself on Iron Man 2. So for the Seaman's Cinema Sit-Down, and number 3 on the Avengers Infinity War countdown, I am the Seaman. I am signing off. Peace!